Даже если люди во всех наших командных пунктах после вражеской атомной атаки замолчат, неуязвимая система автоматически отправит в полет наши стратегические ракеты из шахт и из подводных лодок в правильном направлении. Россия – единственная страна в мире, которая реально способна превратить США в радиоактивный пепел.
Some of that bombastic rhetoric, is right out of the Cold War.
Мы скатились, по сути, во времена новой холодной войны. Чуть ли не ежедневно нас объявляют самой страшной угрозой. То для НАТО в целом, то отдельно для Европы, то для Америки и других стран.
Of course, the people who use it say that it's Putin that's done it.
Newly declassified US intelligence report claims Vladimir Putin ordered hackers to meddle in the US presidential elections in a bid to help Donald Trump win.
Putin says it's us who have done it.
Это, как я уже многократно говорил, не наша вина, что российско-американские отношения находятся именно в таком состоянии.
I mean, that's how these things start.
The red flag came down over the Kremlin tonight as President Gorbachev resigned.
The Soviet Union, as a subject of international and geopolitical reality, no longer exists.
Dark years of totalitarianism stalled the country's standard of living, left its economy near collapse.
In our discussions, President Yeltsin and I reached several important agreements on the ways in which the United States and the other major industrialized democracies can best support Russian reforms.
We go from superpower down to falling on such economic hard times and requiring some degree of assistance. That's a harsh pill for anybody to take. And I think international community didn't really take that seriously.
Russia opened itself up to foreign expertise, and ordinary Russians did not reap the benefits.
Все, что делает наше сегодняшнее правительство во вред коренного населения России, русского народа.
Директор средней школы сельской и говорит, дети от голода падают в обморок.
Мне трудно что-то сказать, потому что жизнь невыносимая.
That failure really helped to set the stage for a return to the era of suspicion of foreign influence.
Russians believe that foreign nations want to split Russia apart, that we are besieged by enemies.
Политика Путина держится на создании образа врага, учитывая общественные фобии, страхи. Это его бизнес.
By demonizing groups that are American or Western, the government is using the West as a kind of political enemy to build up its own domestic reputation.
Russia has no shortage of orphans. In 2008, more than 700,000 children were living without parents. Since the breakup of the Soviet Union, more than 150,000 children have been adopted internationally.
Я считаю, что это унизительно рассчитывать, что ребенку повезет, если он уедет в Америку. Не нужны нам иностранцы, не нужны нам американцы, и не нужно наших детей туда посылать. А еще очень важно, что мы закончим этот мерзкий бизнес, потому что отправление детей за границу – это бизнес.
В мире, наверное, много мест, где уровень жизни получше, чем у нас. Ну и чего? Мы туда отправим всех детей? Можете сами туда переедем? Кажется, что наши ресурсы безграничны. А это не так.
Ты мне вот что скажи. Ты очень хочешь, чтобы у тебя были мама с папой? Очень хочешь. Ты их будешь любить? А если вдруг приедут родители не из России, а откуда-нибудь из другой страны, из Америки, ты согласишься поехать с ними? А? Поедешь, да? Хорошо, Машенька. Посмотрим, что у нас с тобой получится. Может быть, у нас все с тобой и выйдет. Может быть, получится.
When I say orphanages are fine, I don't mean it as in it's a perfect place to grow up. I meant as in, I guess it's safer than being on the street. I guess as a kid, you don't really know why you're taken away. So sorry.
А мама и папа твои далеко? Не знаешь.
I remember as a kid being in this orphanage, getting connected with one specific caregiver, and looks like she was giving me more attention that she would give to other kids. And I felt really, really connected. I felt like she could have been my mother. She was very caring, had a beautiful smile. She saw in me a man, I guess. Even though I was only 11 years old, she saw a man in me. Night times, I was not looking forward to them because I knew that every time she would work night, I'd be allowed to stay up, watch a movie or a show. I would get on alcohol, and I would get the same things happen to me again. And that behavior, her love towards me, continued for 4.5 years that I was in an orphanage.
When I went to the orphanage, I was very confused because I was like, where's my family? You know, where's my sister? Where's my mom? Why did I get separated? What is this place? I had no idea. I was only 4 years old and nobody sat down and explained what was going on. When I first came to the US for a while, I thought that I was stolen. I just remember being in grocery stores and turning around and be like, hey, I'm stolen. I don't know her. My mom was like, no, I adopted her, everything's fine. My mom every night would try to explain that I was adopted and what adoption meant, but I still couldn't grasp that concept.
Alex, what are you doing?
Oh, I'm touching your camera.
Yeah, I don't think that's a good idea.
You can't see.
Hi, Alex.
I can make your face big.
Hi, sure. Now, some kids did not come from Russia. We did, so we were lucky. My mom found us. She's right here with the beautiful cheekbone.
That is the first picture. This one here is the first picture that we took for our post-adoption report. He had been home maybe 7 months. And then, is mine over here? Yes. And that's me. I was very tired after the first trip to go see Daria. And this is me sitting in the airport waiting to go fly home. By the time I was adopting Daria, I had to fly 3 times. And I had to visit the orphanage 12 times. There's a lot of paperwork. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of education. Because I'm a single parent, I had to go through psychiatric testing. I had to do a full physical. I had to do a financial disclosure. They know everything about my finances. They know more than my mother would know. So it was quite exhaustive. I mean, there was nothing in my life that they didn't examine before I was allowed to even accept a referral to a child in Russia.
So this is my room, and basically I love ponies. Right here, she's the queen of all the ponies. Please don't talk. I remember that I had a room and I made fire because I hated that place. And whenever I rocked, the man smacked me. Please don't say get out. I'm really sorry I've said that.
No, there's nothing to be sorry about. No, absolutely.
Say how he wants to.
Yeah.
And that man was fat. He gave me a really dirty shot. The water was like so cold. He put mud in it and soap, then rubbed it all over my body. And then he just took me and said, "Go to your room. Your mother would never come. Your mother's not even real. So that's why she doesn't even love you." And then I screamed and said, "Mommy!"
I decided to give the kids unconditional love right up front, right? And so even when they do the most irritating things for me or their behavior is so poor, I go, well, that was the choice I made to give them a chance at life.
Отказываясь от иностранного усыновления, считая его все-таки позорным явлением, недостойным нашего общества, мы должны сегодня...
Pavel Astachov was a lawyer in real life. He was a lawyer on television, and then he became what's called the Children's Ombudsman of the Russian government. And so he was responsible for overseeing the rights and well-being of children throughout Russia. He is a good soldier. He became kind of the public face of the Russian government.
Я всегда говорил, что Россия должна прекратить иностранное усыновление. Лучше, конечно, чтобы это естественным путем произошло. Б, мы должны ответить на те случаи насилия. А ведь вы не о всех даже знаете.
It would always be about the United States is bad. U.S. parents are irresponsible and can't take care of these Russian kids. The U.S. system is neglecting Russian children. The U.S. justice system is rigged against Russian citizens. Americans can do no right.
Народное право изучал в Америке. Вообще-то я закончил Питтсбургский университет, и меня так учил мой профессор Джулиус Лобел, который, кстати, сам судился со всеми президентами США. Он всегда учил, что любой недружественный шаг должен натыкаться на противодействие.
Pavel's path here was a little bit different. His education in Russia was part of the KGB training process. It didn't make any difference to us. What mattered to us was that he had the legal education prerequisite that we require for any incoming LLM student. Pavel was interested in law and American culture and the kind of television persona of lawyers as well as his studies here, and he probably took both of those back with him.
Данный иск подлежит удовлетворению полностью.
When he became Commissioner for Children's Affairs, we were quite interested in that and proud of it to see that someone who was educated here would have a position like that. And it certainly has been an important position, I think, in the relationships between the United States and Russia.
В 2011 году, за прошедший год, 3 миллиона 700 тысяч зафиксировано преступлений против детей. Простите меня, мы что, будем ждать, когда дядя Сэм приедет, заберет наших детей и осчастливит?
Russia's parliament singled out the United States recently in voting to no longer allow Americans to adopt Russian orphans.
Russia's new law banning American adoptions of Russian orphans is polarizing Russians into two camps, pro-West and anti-West.
I feel ashamed that I am a member of the parliament who voted for this law. In the first reading, I was the only one who voted against this Dima Yakovlev law.
Закон, названный именем Димы Яковлева, мальчик из России, который умер в США в приемной семье.
The Dima Yakovlev law was entirely political, and I found it cruel and inhuman what they did because they linked things together that had nothing to do with each other.
Now, President Putin has signed off on a bill aimed at U.S. citizens accused of abusing the human rights of Russians. It includes a ban on Americans adopting Russian children. The restrictions came about after Washington introduced travel and financial sanctions against Russian officials it alleges are involved in rights violations.
Я предлагаю проголосовать за этот закон. Этим самым мы дадим американской стороне достойный, жесткий и адекватный ответ.
Вы считаете это нормально? Что здесь нормального, если вас унижают? Вам это нравится? Вы садомазохист, что ли?
Но страну не надо унижать.
There was so-called Magnitsky Act in the United States, which was targeting our corrupt bureaucrats who were immediately responsible for the death of lawyer Sergei Magnitsky in Russian prison.
I think we are sending a signal to Vladimir Putin and to the Russian kleptocracy that these kinds of abuses of human rights will not be tolerated.
So they did that, and they put all these Russians on a list. So what are the Russians going to do? I mean, they're going to have to whack America somewhere. So where can you hit Americans? Well, get them on the kids.
Then they try to play on these patriotic feelings. That's our kids, we should take care about them themselves.
Это отвратительно, когда страна отдает свое население. По сути дела, в рабство. Нам самим нужны дети. И наши детские дома, приюты, ничем не хуже, чем эти американские земли.
Plus, there was this speculation about they are not safe in other countries, and it's easy to sell such like horrible stories, like the kids are being adopted to be traded for particular organ transplantation. You know, this kind of things. You know, so to agitate the society.
60 тысяч детей-сирот вывезено в Россию. И даже если 1/10 детей-сирот будут замучены, использованы на трансплантацию органов или для сексуальных утех, то все равно хватит тех 50 тысяч, которые потом будут вербоваться для войны, может быть, даже и с Россией.
At the end of the day, that law punishes the most innocent people in the world. And I met some of these people that it was punishing, these young children. And I met these grieving parents. Truly, it was the hardest thing I did in my job as ambassador, meeting with them and having to tell them that the child that they had begun to bond with, that they already knew, that they had a name for, that they had set up a bedroom for somewhere back in the States, was not going to be able to go home with them. Who wins from that? How is that in Russia's national interest?
Oh, my little mama. Mwah.
Mwah.
I love you, Mom. From Alex.
Kisses and hugs and kisses and hugs. It's all the little ways you show me that you care that make you such a great mom. That's why you're loved so much. Oh, Alex, come here. I gotta give you a hug for that one. Come here, come here. I know you don't. I started looking for another child to adopt. This is actually them. This is Daniel, and this is his sister, and her name was Valeria. They had been exposed to HIV. They were being treated for hepatitis C. Daniel or Valeria had a heart problem, and we were going to have to do surgery when they came home. So they really needed help. And then we heard that they had decided to ban Russian adoptions for Americans. I offered through my agency to give them the medical treatment. If they was just given, I was even just given temporary guardianship by the Russian courts, I could have flown them home and given them medical treatment. And I offered that. I offered all sorts of guarantees, and I never heard anything back. And I kept asking for updates. Nobody would give us updates. I don't even know if they're okay, if somebody actually adopted them. I think they pay a very big price for some very silly politics, and I'm very sad about that.
Isn't the sun so beautiful?
Oh, that's awesome. I love this area. Life is good. That's all I had to say. I lived in an orphanage, and I have experienced it. The good, the bad, and the worst of it. I've heard the idea of Russian politicians basically saying that it is better for our Russian kids to stay in our orphanages than being adopted to North America. I absolutely disagree with that. Me growing up in a Russian orphanage compared to the life that I have now in North America with parents and people that love me, it's better for a kid to have a better future and a family than growing up in an orphanage. Way better. Much better.
Являясь противником иностранного усыновления, я верю в наши силы. Очень хорошо, что такая дискуссия сегодня развернулась. Очень хорошо, что она такой остроты достигла, когда решается вопрос уже на политическом уровне.
I spend a lot of time working all adoption issues here in Washington with politicians. More than once, there has been a politician, a senator, a congressperson who has raised this issue with Russia and said that for normal relations to happen again, the ban on intercountry adoption to America will have to be lifted. That is part of the reset conversation that we need to have.
We leaned in hard to engage with Russia on issues of common interest, from everything from arms control to adoptions and everything in between. And then it ended, because it takes two to tango. And it was very clear early on in Putin's presidency that he wasn't interested in the adoptions agreement, that he wasn't interested in peer-to-peer engagement.
After 2012, when Putin returned to the presidency, there were clashes between riot police and protesters, which kicked off a national propaganda campaign on the part of the government to demonize the opposition movement as American stooges, as paid. There was talk that the State Department and the United States government was paying and supporting in other ways with expertise and money the protest movement. This is in fact an American plot to destabilize Russia and overthrow the Russian government.
Как работают тайные каналы связи российской оппозиции с США и Британией, кто кого курирует и, главное, стратегические цели каждой из сторон. Секретные материалы теперь в Москве.
After Putin came back, the mood changed rather radically because he really cracked down on those kinds of demonstrations and on that kind of political organization.
Так зачем все-таки эти люди пришли в американское посольство? Что они услышали от нового посла?
К ним эти ребята, они ходят как на работу.
Кто такой McFaul? Дипломат? Автор перезагрузки? Или конструктор оранжевых революций?
We became the enemy, and I personally became the poster boy for that kind of rhetoric from the Russian government.
The Dima Yakovlev law was very much aimed at clamping down on foreign forces operating in Russia, and the adoption side was one aspect of that law.
Dima Yakovlev law also prohibited Russian citizens who had both citizenship in Russia and the US from running an NGO, from being deemed the head of an NGO. That resulted in some changes in some of the NGOs like Human Rights Watch.
When I go back and I look at these NGO programs that I run, is Putin against placing young children in loving families? Because that's what we were doing. Is Putin against the work with children with disabilities to help them integrate in society? Is Putin against free and fair elections? Well, maybe so, right? So it's a spectrum. But in shutting down the support that the West provided for an electoral monitoring group like Voice, he wiped out all these other kinds of connections.
People thought it was important for NGOs and civil society between the US and Russia to work together. But in the Russian government, there was fear that NGOs could be part of a strategy to confront the Putin government.
The wave of police raids against non-governmental organizations, foreign cultural organizations, and human rights groups continues in Russia.
Russia passed this foreign agents law aimed at all organizations that receive foreign funding and do so-called political activity. Now, the definition of political activity is extremely broadly written, and it can include anything, from advocacy to trying to change policy to trying to change attitudes. It's been very actively applied to organizations who are working in particular on human rights, corruption, transparency, access to justice, torture.
The Dignity Project was with the Committee Against Torture. I went to Nizhny Novgorod, Russia, in order to lecture on the treatment of severely traumatized patients. We were arrested. I was sentenced to leave the country. I had witnesses that were not heard. Everything is made up in Moscow in advance. That means that the judge has no real role. It just follows the instructions. For us as individuals, these 2 days were very distressing, but it was a time-limited distress, no real danger. The concern is how can our colleagues work in the long run.
The Dima Yakovlev law was a pretext to clamp down on civil society. And I think the NGO laws that have been introduced since, the undesirable organizations law and the foreign agents law, are just a continuation of that same process.
The undesirable organizations law, the Russian government can now simply ban any foreign organization they desire.
Those organizations, their aim is to support Russia in its transition to democracy, aims which are directly counter to the Russian government. It does not believe in Western democratic norms, or at least in their positive influence on society, and it doesn't want these organizations influencing the course of events in Russia.
I saw a particular trial of an NGO in which an excellent lawyer presented a very persuasive, cogent, coherent argument about why his organization was not engaging in political activity, why it hadn't violated the law, and then turned to the prosecutor, waiting for an argument, and the prosecutor couldn't say anything, didn't know what to say. And when the lawyer said, well, maybe you could point to one of the constitutional provisions that you say we're violating, and again, the prosecutor couldn't do that. Couldn't say anything, and the judge is laughing. The judge is laughing at the prosecutor. Everyone in the courtroom is laughing at the prosecutor. But what happens? An hour later, the judge comes back in and rules for the prosecutor, because that's how things work.
We as an artist, we don't have guns, or we don't have tanks, or we don't have these huge military services which can go to different countries, but we have a voice. And we should use it, because this is the only way to stop them, actually.
After he became a president for a third time, Putin decided to change the direction.
They really decide to use the church as a basis for the new political order.
Черные рясы, золотые погоны, все прихожане ползут на поклоны, призрак свободы на небеса.
Our performance was just a week before the election day. They somehow made us first people who will have like the strongest punishment.
Конникова, Самуцевич и Алyokhina совершили хулиганство, то есть грубое нарушение общественного порядка, совершенное по мотивам религиозной ненависти и вражды.
If we will take our case and our time in prison, we spent 2 years, but we are alive. We were not beaten and we were not tortured. Since our action, country really changed. And now, if you will look just for the case of Ildar Dazin, who went to prison for 3 years just for holding poster against the war, he was tortured in prison and raped just because he's a political prisoner.
The role of the criminal justice system in the control and in the persecution of opposition figures and NGOs. It sounds dramatic, but it's a travesty. It is heartbreaking to witness. There has been control emanating from a sphere of the government, and that cannot be disrupted. And so there are many Russian thinkers who are now comparing the use of the Russian court system now to Stalinist times and Stalin's show trials. It's just a sad situation when an entity that in other societies is used as such a great shield of protection, it's completely inverted in the Russian system, and it's only a tool to beat down. It's poisoned.
Лицо зверское, кинжал. Да.
Тем Russia is hate.
Да. По такой теме надо тренироваться.
Я приехал для того, чтобы презентовать доклад, который называется «Угроза национальной безопасности». Когда мы говорим об угрозе национальной безопасности, мы прекрасно понимаем, это угроза в том числе в первую очередь и для части российского общества, которая добивается перемен внутри нашей страны.
Если ты противостоишь бандитам во власти, ты должен понимать, что с тобой могут разбираться бандитскими методами. Готов к этому, Борис, не готов? Не стоит и начинать.
Да, я был абсолютно готов к возможному преследованию внутри страны, но я, конечно, не думал, что они просто меня заблокируют за рубежом. В Кремле ж не дураки сидят, поэтому это все делается очень иезуитски.
За границу, и особенно Штаты, очень любит и депутат Илья Понамарев. Там нравится настолько, что он не пришел в Басманный суд. Оно понятно. Пономарев теперь заочно арестован по делу о растрате в фонде Сколково.
У меня же отобрали абсолютно все деньги, да, я начинал заново с $20. Это все, что у меня наличными было, да, то есть в момент ареста счетов.
Yeah, I was the only one who voted against the annexation of Crimea. Putin wanted it to be unanimous because he wanted to showcase that elite is united for this decision, and it was not united.
Решение депутатов было сегодня единодушным, за одним исключением. Репортаж Александра Батухова.
После обсуждений, которые продлились без малого 1,5 часа, было объявлено голосование за ратификацию договора о вступлении Крыма в состав России.
Закон принят.
Этим единственным, кто проголосовал против, оказался депутат Илья Понамарев.
Лишить мандата Пономарева с формулировкой признать досрочно прекратившим полномочия депутат Пономарев. Это в чистом виде антигосударственная линия.
There is a democracy in the sense that I can vote as I voted. There is no democracy because there are consequences. Where my constituency is in Novosibirsk, majority of people have Ukrainian roots. So for me, the way I should vote was absolutely obvious.
Молодой человек, который вышел на меня изначально на Фейсбуке и попросил, то есть можно ли сделать депутатское обращение. Он сам находится в Мордовии.
Давай, открой.
Being still a member of Russian parliament, I am working for my constituents. I smuggled my voting card, and I have still my network of my political aides. It's probably the most oppressed network of political aides.
When the voting on annexation of Crimea happened that time, I was chief of Ilya's electoral campaign in Novosibirsk. But like that time, one of my friends, KGB guys, FSB guys, came to me and suggested to leave the country. He told me that, you'd better live by yourself, or, we always can find some drugs in your bag and you will make all the confessions that we need you to make.
Я встречал же здесь свое 27, кажется, 28-летие. Я по городу обходил. Голден Гейт. Единственное, что до Алькатраса я не добрался. Ну,
так это от сумы я тюрьмы не зарекаюсь.
Да.
Я вообще не поняла, когда в моей жизни случился этот переход от того, что я просто сижу и там пишу письма как помощник депутата Госдумы. И начались там сначала постановка жучков у меня в моей квартире в Москве. Потом, когда начались какие-то вопросы ФСБшников ко мне по поводу того, что неплохо было бы покинуть Россию. Я ж не герой Пономарев, который может проголосовать один против аннексии Крыма. Я просто человек, который следует своим каким-то убеждениям, своим воззрениям, и который хочет засыпать каждый вечер там спокойно и не думать о том, что вот где-то я соврал, неправду сделал, где-то мне будет стыдно там. И если человек следует своим убеждениям и просто ведет себя по-честному, получается, что в России такие люди не нужны, к сожалению. Когда будет перемена власти, рано или поздно она случится, мы сможем вернуться в нашу страну. Все мы остались там и со своими идеями, со своими убеждениями, со своими желаниями сделать что-то лучшее именно для нашей Родины, для России. И я верю в то, что мы вот со своими идеями сможем еще пригодиться. И я уверена, что наши соотечественники воспримут эти идеи, и вся эта пелена пропаганды, она рано или поздно пойдет.
How do you draw the line between what you seem to be considering as legitimate media and what you would describe as propaganda?
Russia Today falls exactly under definition of foreign agent. And Russia Today is consciously trying to influence not only US but British political processes, continental Europe. They help ultra-right and sometimes ultra-left to destabilize the country.
As we see it from here at RT, we are trying to present an alternative point of view to global affairs.
You are trying to influence other countries' policies directly, and that's your objective. You are very well done. You're very professional. You have great team, but it's not media.
Russians, maybe they're some of the best in the world at this. Russia has a long tradition of propaganda, so the Kremlin uses television to create the story and manipulate mass opinion.
There's been a heated competition today on Capitol Hill. Who knows more about the propaganda machine called Russia Today?
Russian propaganda.
Russian line. RT seems to be financed exclusively by the government.
Just disrupting and deceiving and causing chaos.
Russia understands the power of information. And among all sorts of media, the most dangerous is television.
Гомосексуалисты американец Марк Ньютон и новозеландец Питер Тронг потратили на секс-игрушку всего $8 тысяч. Столько стоило выносить его у суррогатной матери из России.
For example, in the first days after the Dima Yakovlev law, society was very much split. But later, after accepting state propaganda, the number of supporters for this law grew like to 85%.
You know, being here on a Kremlin-funded propaganda network, I'm going to wear my gay pride suspenders and I'm going to speak out against the horrific anti-gay legislation that Vladimir Putin has signed into law that was passed unanimously by the Russian Duma that criminalizes homosexual propaganda, that effectively makes it illegal to talk about homosexuality in public. We've seen a spate of violent attacks on gay people in Russia.
Of course, we'll discuss it later, but
what
about Bradley Manning first?
I'm not really interested in talking about Bradley Manning. I'm interested in talking about the horrific environment of homophobia in Russia right now.
In 2012 and 2013, the Russian government unleashed a campaign against LGBT people. And it was happening in the context of broader crackdown against civil society in Russia.
Введение каких-то санкций за гомосексуализм, либо за
Хули ты так одет, ебать?
В смысле, с тематической вечеринки.
На нахуй.
It's clear that authoritarian leaders have always tried to create enemies to strengthen their own power. And this is ultimately how Putin is painting pictures of LGBTI people, of NGOs as enemies of the state, as something that the rest of society should be afraid of. And the fact that this is coming at the cost of dignity and respect of many people is apparently not important in that context.
Я считаю, что штрафовать геев за пропаганду гомосексуализма среди подростков мало. Им нужно запретить донорство крови спермой, а их сердца в случае автомобильной катастрофы зарывать в землю или сжигать как непригодные для продолжения чьей-либо жизни.
This state-sponsored hate speech on television, in media, describing LGBT people as a Western import, describing them as something that doesn't belong in Russia, essentially changed Russia drastically and very, very fast.
What is unique about Russia is that the LGBTI discussion has come at the center of larger geopolitical relationships and discussions, and used by Putin, obviously, to define an image of Russia that is built around conservative values, around family values, but also used to define how Russia is different from the modern Western world. So what we see is a real polarization in which the LGBTI community, unfortunately, have been made the scapegoat of much larger clashes of values. What we have seen over the past years is that more LGBTI people are leaving Russia. Masha, a famous Russian writer, was one of the first persons to publicly announce that she was leaving because she felt that she could no longer take care of her own family.
The definition of propaganda of homosexuality involves this clause, that it's forming the erroneous impression of social equality of traditional and non-traditional sexual relations. So it's a law that criminalizes talking about social equality.
При голосовании воздержался только депутат Понамарев, и депутат Гудков отказался от голосования. Выводы делайте сами, но я считаю, что в нашей стране очень важно защищать те ценности, которые являются ключевыми для нашего общества. Конечно же, такие слова, как Родина, семья, дружба, уважение к ближнему должны быть в центре нашего внимания.
Gay propaganda law was inspiring hostility versus one particular sexual minority, and I'm to protect all minorities from any kind of discrimination. Of course, I was opposed.
You use the word law, and it immediately we start thinking about laws in the way that we think about them in a law-based society, which Russia isn't. In a country like Russia, laws are messages, they're signals. And the signal that these particular laws send to the larger society is that these people are outside the law, and they're outside the protection of the law. And so you can attack them with impunity. In fact, you will be sort of encouraged to attack them. It wasn't because I was a queer activist that we got forced out. It's because for every person who is inconvenienced, they find a way to get rid of them. Someone like Garry Kasparov, he's got criminal charges pending against him. Many, many people have been charged with fraud, financial fraud. Some other people are charged with more explicitly political crimes. In my case, you could get me through my family. It's pretty much the only thing you could get me through. My ex-partner and I adopted Vova, and then Yolka came along. I gave birth to her. And then a few years after that, we broke up. The kids lived with me, but we continued to raise them together. She lived around the corner and basically was a fully involved second parent. And then a couple of years after that, Daria and I got together. Daria gave birth to Senya, who is now 4. My brother is the donor for Senya, so genetically he is Yolka's cousin and my nephew, but actually, they're all brothers and sisters, obviously. We came to the States because they passed a law outlawing adoption by same-sex couples, which could be used retroactively and which they made it very clear would be used against my family. So that would have affected Vova.
It would be nice if Russian people would not judge each other on their sexual orientation or what family they choose to have. I think Russia should try to see the world a bit differently, not very conservative, how it is right now. The things that Russia say about LGBT people, most of it is bullshit because I think LGBT family is as normal as a traditional family. I mean, there's some aspects you get in a traditional family and something you get in the LGBT family, but you can't say it's bad or good, it's just different.
That was the second day with him.
Yeah. He was happy. He was happy.
He was so tenacious. He had his own will.
Yeah.
And we were pretty easy to bend to it because he was a beautiful little boy.
We flew home with all the expectations that in a couple months, our next trip to Volgograd would be to bring the little boy home and bring him into our family.
That's right.
I remember that moment vividly. I was driving my car south on a road close to home, and our petitioner called me and said, "What are you doing right now?" And I responded that I'm in the car, and she goes, "Pull over. You don't want to be driving when I talk to you."
Мы вводим запрет и на усыновление российских детей иностранными гражданами, одинокими иностранными гражданами тех государств, где приняты законы о легализации однополых браков.
It was the day of our baby shower. I had to go in there and be really happy as people were giving me these gifts, and I was getting emotional because I wasn't really sure if I was going to have to take them all back.
That was the very first article, and that was January 8th, 2014. We wanted to get into a national newspaper. We were hoping, to get this story picked up in Russia was really the whole intent. She was just so tiny and really sweet. She wanted to be held, and we played games with her. And I think it was within, less than half an hour, and Derek said to our translator at that time, "We're going to sign the papers." And so we had to leave on July 1st, which always will be in my mind because it was Derek's birthday, and I remember saying to him, what an amazing birthday gift that, we get to spend this with our new daughter. Early September, we called our coordinator to find out what was happening. And she had basically said, I just returned back from Russia, and, there's been changes there. The one major issue that they had was in regards to same-sex marriages in Canada, and that a child might potentially be placed into a family that, in Russia's opinion, wasn't a natural family. Everyone was asking for clarity. What does this really mean? We can show that we're not a same-sex marriage. We proved and demonstrated to them that we were married in a church, that if something were to happen to Derek and I, we had a very good plan in place to take care of our children. We had backup care that were people who were not in a same-sex marriage. We gave every possible solution to them to show that we met their requirements. And I gave my commitment to this baby that we were coming back to get her. Friends of ours, one of the other couples, they had a court date, and it was maybe 10 days before our court date was scheduled. The couple went, and I can remember waking up, and it was like 3 o'clock in the morning because of the time change, and just sitting there waiting for the email to come. We all had a pact that, we would email instantly because we all had skin in this game. I was astounded. My heart just sank when we got the email that said that they got a no, and we couldn't believe it.
Statements about the adoption of the child by the persons consisting in a same-sex marriage or a person who is a national of the state in which permits same-sex marriages, the judge rejects such an agreement.
With all the information we had, we made that really hard decision not to travel and to close our file. I never thought that I would be the only mom for her. I definitely wanted to be her mom, but I needed her to have parents. And the only way that I knew that could happen is that we released her.
Because I adopted my child from Russia, I have a huge, strong affinity with Russia and with the children in Russia. He was sitting on my lap and I could smell his little head at the top, you know, just smell him and hold him. And I went, this is just so amazing. Every single child should have, you know, arms holding them. I've set up Growing International Families Together, GIFT, which is an international adoption agency. I started off building a very big and strong relationship with Russia to adopt kids from Russia, which is my whole motivation. Britain doesn't have any agreements with any country when it comes to adoption. I was working with the Russian government to facilitate an adoption agreement. And then we heard all these rumors about the gay marriage things, which I just didn't believe, because I just thought it was just so off the wall. Russia is not going to allow adoptions of their children into countries where they have the same-sex marriage bill. Even though you may be a heterosexual couple adopting from Russia, there is the possibility that if the adoption breaks down, is disrupted, the child will come into the care system and then they will be adopted by a same-sex couple, which is against the Russians' understanding of what an ideal parent is for one of their children in need.
Western European side especially have liberalized certain values of same-sex marriages, for example, or in the issue of euthanasia, which clearly don't mesh well still with the very conservative outlook that Russians have on their own society. And I think the Russian leadership at the moment is clearly tapping into that and trying also to redefine that traditional Russian agenda so as to pitch it more clearly against that of the West.
I started writing about Putin when he first became sort of the heir apparent to Yeltsin. And I thought I was among the very, very few people who were terrified of him. My view of Putin has changed very little over the last 18 years. Putin is effectively restoring a totalitarian system in Russia and has openly declared war on Western civilization, which the West somehow persists in ignoring.
Это они пытаются все время нам здесь подсказывать, что нам нужно делать внутри страны, кого избирать, кого не избирать, по каким процедурам. Мы же никогда этого не делаем, не лезем туда.
Putin has felt that some elements in the US and in Western Europe are out to get him. He is a man who has been trained to see enemies and who believes that the world works through the active measures taken by intelligence agencies. There are plenty of people around Putin who share exactly the same intelligence service background and who have the same mindset that has been drilled into them by decades of training. And the more of those people concentrated around Putin, the harder it becomes for alternative points of view to get a more rational outlook across to Putin himself.
Putin is always saying that he is more European than Europeans are, that he is upholding the core values of European society, the Christianity, family, order, real democracy, and that Europeans totally forgot about that. And that's why he is playing with Europeans' constituents by supporting radical right political parties.
Austria, Bulgaria, and the Netherlands' far-right leaders all accepted Marine Le Pen's invitation. France's National Front wanted its Eurosceptic allies present for the party's Congress, but it's another politician who stole the limelight.
We can see how the will of the European people is betrayed by unknown civil servants in Brussels. These are European Union employees who are in fact puppets of the United States of America.
It was recently revealed that the FN has been granted a loan worth millions of euros from a Russian bank.
These radical right political parties are saying exactly the same things, that we should stop immigration, that we should not acknowledge equal right for gay people, opposing gay marriages. Putin doesn't want to be against Europe. He wants to be against some imaginary space which he calls gay Europe, gay Europe. So this is a very convenient propaganda cliché.
When I was younger, I never thought I was going to be activist or something like this. I was a normal kid. When I came out, I thought that people were going to support me. But in Russia, people didn't understand that being gay is normal, and they tried to change my sexual orientation. So I'm successful, became to be a refugee in Canada. I found a home here. Psychologists tell to me that gay people is a result of American propaganda in order to destroy population in Russia. But I was 14 years old, and even 14 years old, I understand that this psychologist is a little bit crazy. I'm not a result of American propaganda. I'm gay because I was born with this sexual orientation. At my family, at school, everywhere, it's big homophobia, and nobody protect me. Последние 2 года я слушал вот такие замечания. Как не встречать в родной школе, пидорас. I tried to protest against homophobia with our LGBTQ community in Russia. I was arrested several times. My friends died after being beaten by police. I realized that I have no future in Russia. In Russia, only one way to be survive for me is pretend that I'm straight and love Vladimir Putin. But I cannot do this. I cannot lie so much. I sleep on the left side of the bed, and then Ethan sleep on the right side of the bed. We put like Russian and Canadian flag and the rainbow flag in the middle. I think if Russia had a normal president and Russian mass media tells that being gay is okay, and Russian government didn't make this stupid law, Russian people became to be more tolerant. After the movie Children for 04, and after all this publication and mass media, and after my LGBT work, around 500 letters I received from Russian LGBT community. I knew more than 10 people who did a suicide. And can you imagine the real statistic, how many people do suicide nowadays in Russia? I'm always thought that I'm gonna be strong all the time, but I started to have mental issues, like in January and February this year I had a panic attacks. So I even called ambulance because I thought that I'm dying. I went to the hospital and my family doctor said that I have a panic attack because of my past and everything like this.
Look, he's bringing in the Russian. Look at that. That's beautiful right there.
Well, I have experience of protesting signs. Guys, what do you think? LGBT teenagers from Russia, you're not alone. We together, Canadian LGBT teens.
That's amazing. That's perfect.
Right, guys?
That's perfect, yeah.
I think that when I'm gonna have a kids, it's gonna be hard to find homophobic people because of the world gonna change a lot. I'm gonna have children that are going to stand up for homosexuality because that's the only way that it'll stop. Gay people have rights nowadays because of somebody stand together for their rights in 60s, in 70s, in 80s. And many young gay people, they forget about this fighting for human rights. And last week I reached the founder of Children for 04, Ilya, and asked how we, Canadian, can help for you. And she says that many Russian teenagers who live in a country full of discrimination, they're looking for us as example. They're looking that we have a free world here. And she said that the best gift which we can make for Russian LGBT society is send a message that we support them and we care about them. Yeah. I feel like Vladimir Putin.
Olympic Games. Во всем мире, в принципе, ни для кого это не было проблемой. В России почему-то это проблема.
У нас есть запрет на пропаганду гомосексуализма и педофилии. Я хочу вот это подчеркнуть. На пропаганду среди несовершеннолетних. Это разные вещи абсолютно. Абсолютно разные вещи. Запрет на определенные отношения, либо на пропаганду вот этих отношений.
I think what we were lacking during the Olympics is a strong stand from the International Olympic Committee that would condemn this type of policies, anti-LGBT legislation.
It was perhaps a missed opportunity on the EU side to stand up for values that we espouse, and especially those on gay rights.
Our international community didn't say for Vladimir Putin, you made anti-gay law because you hate minority in your country. We will not let you make Olympic game in Russia. But international community didn't do this.
Since the Olympic Games, somehow Putin and his team decide that they are not kind of a president team anymore, but they are quasi-gods.
Putin's popularity is certainly surged with the Olympic Games, which boosted Russian confidence, say, on the international plane, saying, here we are, we're able to organize these wonderful games, and actually we didn't do too badly on scoring medals. On that wave of enthusiasm, I think, Putin managed to follow on with the invasion and annexation of Crimea and actually take it with lots of support. I mean, you see the popularity ratings of Putin at the time, you know, they go up into the Soviet figures, 80%, close to 90%.
Президент Российской Федерации Владимир Владимирович Putin.
I was at a conference of people who are active in opposing Putin, and I was shocked to see how many people are living in exile. It feels like a huge drain.
During first 2 years since the annexation of Crimea, is some 1.5 million people who left Russia. And this is the most energetic, creative, advanced part of the population.
It has become very difficult for think tanks to find, independent voices who are not intimidated in speaking their minds. We see that quite a number of those Russian experts have in fact relocated to Germany or to the US.
I hope Putin realizes that young people in Russia, they don't want to live in a claustrophobic atmosphere. He can't come down hard against diversity, because in doing that, he's going to lose the future.
Приглашению визу получить очень трудно. Моей матери отказали в визе, потому что она одинокая женщина. Лучше накопить денег, заплатить за учебу, как делают большинство.
Да, и уже через несколько дней можно.
Подаваться на беженство, да. Беженство дается людям, у которых есть угроза жизни и здоровью в их странах.
Несмотря на то, что я запытал, по жизни у меня все равно были потеснения в школе, хоть я никому не говорю, но все равно из-за внешнего вида притеснения.
Самая для тебя основная проблема – это получить визу. А дальше уже, когда ты сюда приедешь, здесь сильный ЛГБТ-комьюнити, здесь как бы люди, они адекватные, они понимают, что в России быть геем и нормально жить – это две разные вещи. Many of Russian LGBT teens, they dream to live in another country. They dream to live in a free world, where they can have a family, where they can go with their partner together and not be scared, when they can go to school learning subjects without being discriminated. I think Canadian government should make some special program into Russian LGBT. Maybe a certain amount of Russian LGBT can come to Canada without this visa barrier and apply here as a refugee or apply as a refugee in Russia.
I am personally extremely concerned with LGBT asylum seekers. And I think that what's lacking in terms of the world response is asylum. None of the European countries are granting asylum on the basis of anti-gay persecution. None of the European countries are doing it. There has been a huge influx of LGBT asylum seekers. I'm aware of at least 1,000 people just in New York City alone. It would be much better if the United States provided group status for Russian LGBT people so that they could get refugee status while still in Russia and come here as refugees.
I was always told that Russia have so much more potential for you. They want you to stay in Russia. They want you to grow up from the orphanage and go to school and be in Russia and join the army and be this and be that. But deep down in your heart, you always felt like, no, this is total crap. No one would care about you. As soon as you're out the door, out of the orphanage, that's it. It's you alone by yourself in this world. And it's either you make it or you don't. No one would care. The orphanage itself, it looks nice and everyone welcomed you at first and you felt like you going to be belong in that place and it felt like this is the place where you're going to be loved, but you were not allowed to express yourself. You were not allowed to be your own personality. It felt like they're giving you the personality and it felt like they're making you into something they want you to be. It was all about basically following the orders, following the rules. You were not allowed to express your own opinion, your thoughts. I don't know, in a way it felt like they want you to do the things the way they want you to do the things. Looking back at it, it felt like they want you to be kind of like a mechanical robot. Whatever they make you into, whatever they want you to be, that's what you're gonna have to be, and that's what you're going to be. And that's what I did not like about the whole system.